Story 1. Mysterious Winter Night, a True Horror Story. Introduction. The small town of Frostvale lay nestled among snowy hills, bathed in the ethereal glow of the full moon. Winters in Frostvale were harsh and unforgiving, but the townsfolk had learned to adapt, lighting their fireplaces and bundling up in thick layers to withstand the biting cold. However, this winter was unlike any they had experienced before. For weeks, an eerie stillness had hung over the town, broken only by the occasional howling wind that seemed to carry whispers of dread. At the edge of the town stood an ancient manor, abandoned for decades and cloaked in legends of sinister happenings. It was said that those who dared to enter never returned. Most dismissed these tales as mere folklore, but the story of the mysterious winter night would prove otherwise, a chilling testament to the truth behind the legends. The story a dare turned deadly. It all began when a group of 4 friends, Emily, Daniel, Claire, and Mark, decided to test their courage. Bored of the usual winter festivities, they dared each other to explore the abandoned Blackwood Manor on the outskirts of town. Snowflakes swirled in the air as the group trudged through the snow, their breath visible in the frosty night. "Are we really doing this?" Claire asked, her voice trembling more from fear than cold. "Come on, Claire," Mark teased. "It's just an old house. What's the worst that could happen?" Emily, the most daring of the group, grinned. "We'll go in, take a look around, and be out before you know it. It's just a bit of fun." The friends reached the manor's wrought iron gate, rusted and frozen. Beyond it, the manor loomed like a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. The windows were shattered, the roof partially caved in, and the door hung slightly ajar as if inviting them in. As they stepped onto the property, a sudden gust of wind slammed the gate shut behind them. Startled, they exchanged uneasy glances but pressed on. The haunting begins. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of decay and shadows. The walls were adorned with tattered wallpaper, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and rot. Their footsteps echoed eerily as they moved deeper into the house, their flashlights barely piercing the darkness. Daniel found a dusty photograph on a table depicting a family with cold, expressionless faces. "This must have been the family that lived here," he muttered. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. Claire screamed, and Mark rushed to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. "Okay, joke's over," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Let's get out of here." Emily's flashlight flickered and went out. "Great, my batteries are dead." A low, guttural sound echoed from somewhere upstairs, freezing them in their tracks. "What was that?" Daniel whispered, his face pale. "Probably just the wind," Mark said, though his voice lacked conviction. But they all knew it wasn't the wind. Unseen forces. The group decided to stick together as they explored further, hoping to find another way out. In one of the rooms, they found a journal belonging to a man named Henry Blackwood, the former owner of the manor. The entries grew increasingly erratic, describing how he had become obsessed with summoning spirits to communicate with his deceased wife. The final entry read, "The ritual is complete. Tonight she will return to me, but something else, something darker, has answered my call." As Emily read the passage aloud, the air grew heavy, and the sound of soft, ghostly whispers filled the room. They spun around, but no one else was there. Suddenly, Daniel cried out in pain, clutching his arm. When they looked, claw marks had appeared, deep and bleeding. "We need to leave, now!" he shouted. But the manor had other plans, the dark entity. The friends tried to retrace their steps but found themselves hopelessly lost. The layout of the manor seemed to shift, leading them in circles. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and sinister laughter echoed through the halls. In one room, they encountered a mirror that seemed to reflect a different version of the room they were in. a version filled with bloodstains and mutilated corpses. When Mark reached out to touch the glass, a hand from the other side grabbed his wrist. He screamed as the hand began pulling him into the mirror, but the others managed to free him just in time. "We have to destroy whatever is causing this," Emily said, her voice firm despite her fear. They remembered the journal and its mention of a ritual. They surmised that the ritual had bound a malevolent entity to the manor, and unless they broke the bond, they would never escape. Confronting the evil. In the basement, they found a ritual circle etched into the floor, surrounded by blackened candles. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped even further, and the entity revealed itself, a towering figure of shadow with glowing red eyes. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its voice echoing unnaturally. The friends fought against their terror, working together to disrupt the ritual circle. Emily recited a prayer she remembered from church, while Daniel and Mark destroyed the candles. Claire found a vial of holy water in her pocket, something her grandmother had given her for protection, and poured it over the circle. The entity screamed, a sound so piercing it made their ears bleed. The shadows swirled violently before vanishing, and the house fell silent. Escape and aftermath. As dawn broke, the friends stumbled out of the manor, bruised and shaken but alive. They vowed never to speak of what had happened, knowing no one would believe them. The Blackwood Manor stood silent once more, its dark secret buried for now. Moral of the story. Curiosity can lead to danger, especially when it involves meddling with the unknown. Respect the boundaries of the supernatural, for some doors are meant to remain closed. Story 2. The Mysterious Cap, a True Horror Story. Introduction. In a sleepy little village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there existed an air of timelessness. The villagers lived simple lives, steeped in tradition, and seldom ventured beyond the surrounding woods. Amid the ordinary routines, the village was whispered to be cursed by a strange artifact, a cap said to bring great fortune to those who found it, but at an unspeakable cost. The cap, adorned with strange symbols and embroidered with silver thread that shimmered unnaturally in the moonlight, had been lost for decades. Legends swirled about its origins, some claiming it was forged by a malevolent spirit, others swearing it was cursed by a scorned witch. But few dared to search for it, fearful of the tales that ended in madness and despair. When an ambitious young man named Elias discovered the cap in the ruins of an old, forgotten cabin deep in the woods, the village's dark history began to unravel once more. His curiosity ignited a chain of events that no one could have foreseen, plunging the village into chaos and forcing its inhabitants to confront their deepest fears. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Elias, a young man yearning to escape the monotony of village life, was an amateur explorer. He often roamed the forest for hidden treasures, but this time he stumbled upon a crumbling cabin cloaked in moss. Inside, he found the cap resting atop a dusty trunk. The silver embroidery seemed to pulse faintly, even in the dim light. Despite the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine, Elias couldn't resist its allure. He placed the cap on his head. A shiver coursed through him as the whispers began. At first, they were faint, a single voice promising wealth, power, and the life he always dreamed of. His reluctance melted away, replaced by an intoxicating sense of invincibility. Chapter 2. Strange Fortunes. When Elias returned to the village, his life began to change in inexplicable ways. He discovered gold coins in his meager garden, his crops thrived beyond expectations, and strangers from nearby towns offered him work and resources. The villagers marveled at his newfound prosperity, but whispers of suspicion spread. The cap never left Elias's head, not even when he slept. The whispers grew louder at night, instructing him on what to say, where to go, and whom to trust. The more he obeyed, the more he gained, but the more his mind unraveled. Chapter 3. The Price of Power. Elias began experiencing vivid nightmares. In them, he saw the forest twisted and alive, its trees bleeding and its shadows crawling toward him. Faces of the dead appeared in his dreams, their hollow eyes filled with despair. Worse, the cap began to tighten, as if fusing with his scalp. The villagers noticed his change. His once friendly demeanor turned cold, his eyes hollow and distant. A strange aura surrounded him, causing children to flee and animals to cower. Yet, Elias brushed it all aside, drunk on his fortune. But his greed came at a cost. A terrible accident struck the village. A fire destroyed the town hall, claiming lives. The whispers told Elias it was no coincidence. The cap demanded sacrifice. Chapter 4. The Truth of the Cap. Desperate for answers, Elias sought out the oldest villager, an enigmatic woman named Yara, who was rumored to know the village's darkest secrets. Reluctantly, Yara revealed the cap's origin. Centuries ago, the cap belonged to a powerful warlock who used it to command spirits and accumulate wealth. But the cap was cursed when the warlock betrayed a witch who had helped him. She infused it with her wrath, ensuring that anyone who wore it would suffer a fate worse than death. Yara warned Elias that the cap could not be removed unless he willingly relinquished his greed. But by then, Elias was too far gone, too consumed by the cap's promises. Chapter 5. Descent into Madness. The cap's whispers turned darker, urging Elias to commit unspeakable acts. He found himself drawn to the forest, where he discovered old graves and heard voices calling his name. The line between reality and hallucination blurred, and Elias began to see the faces of the dead in every shadow. The villagers, terrified of his growing malevolence, banded together to confront him. But Elias, consumed by the cap's power, lashed out violently, injuring several people. His once loving community now saw him as a monster. Chapter 6. The Final Stand. Realizing the cap could destroy the village, Yara led the villagers in a desperate attempt to save Elias and themselves. They lured him to the forest, where the cap's power was strongest, but also where it could be destroyed. In a climactic battle, the villagers fought against Elias, who had become a puppet of the cap. Yara, chanting an ancient spell, managed to sever the cap's connection to him, but it came at a great cost. The cap resisted, releasing a burst of dark energy that claimed Yara's life. Elias, freed from the cap's control, collapsed in tears. The villagers buried the cap deep in the forest, sealing it with protective wards. Moral greed and ambition, when left unchecked, can lead to one's downfall. The story of the mysterious cap serves as a reminder that true happiness comes not from material wealth, but from community, humility, and balance. Even the most tempting offers can carry hidden dangers, and it is up to us to resist the allure of easy rewards that come at the expense of our humanity. Story 3. The Mysterious Shoes, a True Horror Story. Introduction. In the small, secluded town of Ravenwood, stories of eerie happenings spread like wildfire. From haunted woods to a cursed lake, the townsfolk had grown accustomed to a touch of the supernatural. However, no story was as peculiar as the one surrounding a pair of worn-out leather shoes that had appeared at the town's flea market. These shoes, unassuming and ordinary in appearance, would soon change the lives of those who dared to wear them. Forever. Chapter 1. Discovery at the Flea Market. Ravenwood's flea market was bustling as usual on Saturday morning. Among the vendors was Mr. Grayson, an elderly man with a collection of trinkets and curiosities. Among his wares sat a pair of scuffed brown leather shoes that seemed out of place. They were old, but remarkably well preserved. A small tag hung from them. One size fits all. Teenager Lucy, an avid thrifter with a knack for finding hidden treasures, was drawn to the shoes. Mr. Grayson, noticing her interest, warned her in a low voice. "They come with a price beyond money." Lucy brushed off his warning, believing it to be a sales tactic, and bought the shoes for $5. Chapter 2. The shoes fit perfectly. Back home, Lucy slipped on the shoes. Despite their worn appearance, they felt as if they had been custom-made for her. She admired them in the mirror, but as she took a step, a chill ran down her spine. The room grew colder, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a shadow move in the corner of her eye. That night, Lucy had vivid dreams of a woman running through a dense forest, terrified, barefoot, and bleeding. She woke up sweating, the image of the woman etched in her mind. Chapter 3. The first incident. The next day, Lucy wore the shoes to school. She noticed something strange. People seemed unusually drawn to her, almost as if she exuded an invisible charm. Even her teachers, who were usually stern, gave her unwarranted praise. However, with each compliment, Lucy felt an inexplicable heaviness in her chest, as though something dark was feeding off her newfound popularity. That evening, while walking home, she noticed muddy footprints trailing her despite the dry weather. Chapter 4. The curse unfolds. Lucy began experiencing blackouts. She would wake up in strange places, her hands and shoes covered in dirt. One morning, she found herself standing in the middle of the forest from her dreams. Nearby, a shallow grave had been disturbed. She confided in her best friend, Mia, who agreed to help her investigate. They returned to the flea market, but Mr. Grayson was gone, his stall empty. Another vendor whispered that he had vanished years ago, and his stall had been untouched ever since. Chapter 5. The shoe's history. Lucy and Mia dug deeper and uncovered the story of Margaret Bellamy, a woman who had been accused of witchcraft in the 1800s. Margaret had been hunted down and killed by an angry mob. Legend had it that her spirit lingered, seeking revenge. Her shoes, the only thing left behind, were said to curse anyone who wore them, forcing them to relive her torment. Chapter 6. The final warning. The more Lucy wore the shoes, the stronger Margaret's influence became. Lucy began losing her sense of self, her voice blending with another in moments of anger or fear. Mia begged her to get rid of the shoes, but every time Lucy tried to take them off, they clung to her feet like a second skin. Desperate, Lucy decided to burn the shoes, but as the flames licked at the leather, a piercing scream echoed through the house, and the fire extinguished itself. Chapter 7. A Reckoning. Realizing that she needed to break the curse at its source, Lucy and Mia returned to the forest. Guided by her dreams, Lucy found the spot where Margaret had been buried. Together, they unearthed the bones and performed a ritual they had found in an old spell book. As they chanted, the wind howled, and shadows danced around them. Margaret's spirit emerged, her face a mixture of sorrow and rage. Lucy pleaded with her to let go of her pain and find peace. After a tense moment, Margaret let out a mournful wail before dissipating into the night. The shoes fell from Lucy's feet, disintegrating into ash. Conclusion. Lucy and Mia returned to Ravenwood, forever changed by their experience. The town's stories of the supernatural now felt all too real. Lucy learned to appreciate the power of empathy and the importance of respecting history. She also realized the dangers of seeking popularity at any cost. Moral. The story of mysterious shoes teaches us that not everything is as it seems, and the past can leave echoes that demand to be heard. Respect the stories of those who came before, and never underestimate the power of unresolved pain.